Hey, I'm here. Welcome, welcome. Hello, my friends. It is today. It's the 18th of. I don't have to fucking think now, aren't I? It's October. It's the 18th of October, 2023. Here we are. It's Chat with Matt. It's 9 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. I still seem to be tilted up a bit. 9 a.m. on a Wednesday morning here in New Zealand, coming to you live from Paraumu Beach here in Kapiti, New Zealand. It'll be my last broadcast from here for some time because in a couple of days, flying to Ecuador. So next Wednesday I will be in Ecuador. I don't know if I'll be able to do the broadcast at this time, but I will keep you informed about when I am doing my chat with Matt. Just trying to think exactly where we'll be on a Wednesday. I'm not sure. I haven't. It's because it's a day behind, so it'll be Tuesday over there, etc., etc. But I will try and keep my schedule as best I can. Although we are flying. No, we're not flying. We're driving into the Amazon when we first get. Well, not when we first get there. We have one day of rest to try and recover from the jet lag. No, not flying out till Friday, Sister Susie. And then going into the Amazon for 3 days and then coming back and then flying out to the Galapagos Islands, which will be awesome. And then we'll be on a boat for 8 days. So there's potential if I don't show up next week or the week after. It's basically because I can't. I don't know what the reception is going to be like. I'm presuming these days in a lot of the world we can get cellular reception and I will be able to do a live stream, and it might be a shorter one or it might be whatnot. But don't freak out and call the police if you don't hear from me for a while. It's not my intent to ghost you or to drop out, but we do have to be realistic. Sometimes this happens, but it's definitely my intention to utilize this opportunity to bring in some excitement and some different energies from different parts of the world. I'm very looking forward to being inspired, and inspired will do. I could say triggered because it's probably what's going to happen. It will be both inspiring and triggering, nurturing, supportive, and intense. Intensely transformational. Definitely expecting that. Over the 6 weeks, we're going to do all sorts of awesome things. We've got a retreat to do from Arenal volcano in the middle of Costa Rica. And then we're going into Mexico to the pyramids down there in the Cancun area, on the whatever peninsula, can't remember the name, Caribbean side, which we haven't been to before. I need to be to the Pacific side of Mexico once, back in 2019. Anyway, my friends, what do you guys want to know? Who's in charge here? What's going on? Little bit of comment on the poster I put up, not really about the poster. So the poster is me doing Hansasan, the swan pose, in the lagoon at Bali at sunrise from a while ago. That would have been 2019, I think. I choose to say yes, I can to my dreams. I've been using this mantra a little bit actually as I do my walks up the hill. Yes, I can. I choose yes. Because it's really easy to start choosing no. It feels inherently safer to choose no. And I know a lot of people talk about having trouble saying no to other people's requests, and I get that. It's really important that we have the capacity to... Why do I want to sneeze all of a sudden? It's really important that we do have the capacity to say no to other people's requests when it doesn't really serve us to, quote unquote, people please, do what they want in the time. So a lot of people do have to practice saying no to external influences in their life. That is very true, and I'm one of those people. But also, what is interesting, many of those very same people, while it's easy for them to say yes to someone else's request, it's very hard for them to say yes to doing what they feel to do internally, what they are, what they feel motivated to do by a force that is much deeper. God, that's annoying. My nose is so itchy now. I didn't have any inclination at all until I started this live stream. Oh, God. And they, and so struggle to say no to other people and struggle to say yes to themselves. That's the point. So internally, deciding that life is a yes, and that we can say yes to life, yes to our dreams, yes to who we be, is really, really important. Hey, Sister Tanya. So it's definitely a practice that's beneficial for many of us, to practice saying yes, to practice getting in the vibration of yes, to practice feeling that life is basically supportive and that we don't need to be so on guard all of the time. We don't need to be looking out for what the next problem is going to be, what the next threat is going to be, because if we're basically, what you look for, you find. And so if you're looking for threats, dangers, and problems, that's what you find. And then you use that information to justify why you're always looking for them, right? It's a self-perpetuating belief system that the world is hard, that the world is cruel, that life's a bitch, and then you die, right? That belief system self-perpetuates, because what you believe is what you see, because what you believe influences what you expect to have happen, and what you expect to have happen influences what cues you're looking for in the world. We are always manipulating the information that was coming to us. Our brain does this automatically. We manipulate the information that's coming to us to reinforce what feels comfortable for us, the belief that we're holding, our perspective, our projection, our, what's that word? Prediction. Better than projection. Our prediction of the world. We want to keep justifying that we know what's going to happen. It helps us to feel safe, to reinforce the delusion that we know what's going to happen. It seems that we do know what's going to happen because we're creating it. Right? So we think we're predicting the world, but we're actually creating the world. And we're creating it by predicting it's going to be a certain way. So we think we're very smart because we know the world's shit, but we're actually creating a shit world for ourselves. That's the upshot, right? And we can use that very same superpower, flip it on its head, and start predicting that the world is going to show up and give us what we want. We can say yes to the world, that it is providing the foundation or providing the playground for us to have a good, expansive, enjoyable, nurturing or enlivening experience here on the planet. But we need to start expecting that to happen, and that involves us risking being disappointed. And it also feels edgy or scary for those of us who have become habituated to expecting it to be shit, because we're comfortable in the fact that we know it's going to be shit, and it's going to be shit, and therefore nothing seems to be threatening because it's all just shit, right? And we know that. So to change the narrative, and really to change the narrative, is to go against the majority of society, right? Which feels kind of like a maverick move as well. And you know, we've got in trouble in other lifetimes for going against the majority of the population, most of us. So that feels edgy as well, and dangerous. And to actually expect the world to not be the way that it's been projected on television, to not to be the way that other people around us who are watching television expect it to be, right? And to actually expect life to be good feels dangerous. It feels like we don't belong on the planet if we're expecting that, because we're going against the majority. We feel like an alien or an outcast or a reject, right? So it's a difficult practice, but it's a really beneficial practice. And I've used the word practice a few times because that's exactly what it is. This is not just flicking a switch. This is not just, oh, now I'm looking at the world, it's all positive. Everything positive is going to happen to me because I believe the world is positive. You can't just say, I believe the world is positive and is going to support me, and then expect to see everything coming in supporting you, because generally you'll see the exact opposite. When you start... Awesome, Tanya. Maintain focus on riding your bike in the forest. It's an awesome thing to be doing too. Very nurturing and sustaining and healthy, which is great, as long as you don't crash your bike into a tree or off the path or something. Where was I going? Completely lost track, so that's probably good. Because I was starting to roll off on something. I'll read these comments. Exactly, Susie, and you will hear all about it. Well, at least you'll hear a lot about it. I can't say you'll hear all about it because that's very conclusionary and not probably not probably what's going to happen. Talking about my trip overseas, Susie's talking about. Jill said, took 5 attempts of switching off and rebooting before I got on here tonight. Pesky tech. Yeah, talking about beliefs, sister Jill. Tech doesn't need to be that way, and it isn't that way for a lot of people. But they have a different relationship with tech. This is the point. Now, I'm not saying that you're wrong for having that relationship for tech, and I recognize that it is your experience with tech, but I'm also saying that if you choose, I've just remembered what I was talking about before, if you choose to change your relationship with tech and start to open up a opportunity for tech to be more supportive in your life, more influential and more easy, then it potentially will, after, this is the point, you clear the belief that it's not going to be. And it's difficult to clear that belief because you have all of this evidence of this is the way that it is. So this is the point. So when you start expecting the world to be more supportive, rather than seeing it all just flow in as more supportive, you actually quite often see a pullback, and it gets worse than it ever was, right? Because that's what's happening as you clear out all of your beliefs, all of the remnants of energy that have been collected and stored as evidence for how bad the world is, which supported your overriding belief, which you felt safe in because you felt that you could predict the world based on what you'd always believed, because that's what you'd always seen. And so that feels safe and predictable. And our ego loves predictability above all else, because then it can be right. And it wants to be right before it wants to be happy, unfortunately, our little egoic presence. Not that the ego's wrong. It has a lot of uses in keeping us able to experience this opportunity here on the planet. The ego gives us the ability to feel separate so that we can have a relationship with others. That's what the ego's job is, to maintain an identity of separation, which is an illusion, but a necessary one for us to have relationship experiences, not just relating to other people, but relating to anything, right? If I don't feel separate, then I can't see this as a pen. I just see it as energy that's part of me, and therefore I don't have a relationship with this that, is something, right? Part of the experience of life. We're here to experience life, and so we have all of these things in our life that seem different from us so that we can relate to them, use them, experiment with them. It's all a big experiment. So choosing to say yes, 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 and then be willing to go through the process of clearing all of the shit that protests that out. And this is the same with choosing to feel safe in the world, choosing to feel confident, choosing to feel abundant and wealthy and prosperous in the world, right? You can't just choose abundance consciousness and expect money to just start showing up in your bank. You're going to have to go through a process of having all of this lack come up in your face to try and shake you out of your new belief, right? And it's not a conspiracy that the universe is testing you or anything like that. This is purely energy mechanics, right? You are choosing to change your resonance, change your vibration, and therefore the vibrations in your field that don't resonate with the new vibration are going to become discordant, and therefore they're more noticeable, right? These energies that have been hidden in your field and have been influencing you potentially subtly, but also intrinsically, so not such a subtle influence, but a subtle presence. You haven't been so aware of them because they feel so normal and natural. It feels like part of you, right? These old beliefs feel so similar, so natural that you're not aware that they're actually just a belief in your field. Right now, when you start consciously choosing to believe something that's contrary to something that's been in your field for a long time, that energy starts to become highlighted. It starts to become obvious. Because it's now going against the vibration you're choosing to hold. So you're choosing to hold this vibration. This other thing feels painful now. And so it's demanding your attention. And it seems like it's just come up. It seems like it's an attack quite often. Oh, I'm being attacked, right? It's not. It's basically old vibrations that have been in your field forever now becoming obviously out of alignment. And it's an opportunity. It's not an easy opportunity because you have to keep bringing your attention back to what you're choosing. You have to be dedicated enough, devoted enough to yourself to keep reinforcing a vibration that is creating pain. It's creating discomfort as these other old vibrations, which are much more familiar to you, now have become discordant and are hurting you and potentially showing you all of this stuff that is shaking your confidence in what you have just chosen, whether that be safety or whether that be abundance or whether that be believing that the world is supportive. It doesn't really matter what you've chosen to start believing. You are always having to go through the process of highlighting and slowly but surely eroding. We could call that releasing, but a lot of people have this mentality that if I say it's releasing, then it's just going to go away. It's not. It's going to slowly be eroded through your consistent choice to align with a belief system that better serves you, that better allows you to live more purposefully on the planet. And there's no absoluteness about that. It's not that there's a one path for everyone and we all have to start doing this and doing this. And you all have complete free will to change what you're believing. For some people, this process is actually believing that the world is more dark, right? The believing that whatever, right? I don't need to go into another example, but there's no one right way. That's the point, right? We all have free will and we're all going through processes, and it's the common ground is the process is the same. Whatever you have habitually, historically believed that is deeply entrenched in your field, as you choose to evolve out of that, and every being, this is another similarity, every being wants to keep evolving. No being is happy for any length of time, any significant length of time, being static in what it has chosen, right? Even the Dark Lords and any being, right, is in a process of change. We're not all changing in the same direction because there is no one real goal. It's not like we're all going back to the light. Some of us are because that's important to us, but others aren't. And that's okay, right? It is a very, very big universe, or cosmos, whatever you want to call it. And there are many, many, infinite number of individuations having experiences. And we're all allowed to have our own experiences, right? It's not that we have to fight. We don't need to prove that our experience is the right one. We don't need to save other people. We don't. We can help people who are drawn to us because they resonate with us and they're going in the same direction, obviously. Of course, that's what I do. That's what lots of people do. That's what we all do, really. We love to feel that we have a connection, that we belong, that we can help others, and we have this community and we collaborate and we, yeah, of course. They do that on the other side as well. Yeah. They're not mean to each other. They're not actually quote unquote mean in general. It's only relative. But anyway, maybe I'm digressing. My nose is so itchy. I don't know why it's so itchy all of a sudden when I got on this live stream. The other thing that I want to talk about, because it was brought up in the under the post that I put on, was time. Sister Sam wrote something about, I thought it was Wednesday, which it is here, but anyway, I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. Fuck. I will sneeze at some stage, so don't be surprised. I'll have some lemon juice, that might help. I'm triggering something, obviously, but anyway. So yeah, time is one of those structures that has been very constant and very supportive to our structured society, right? It's been very useful for the shadow masculine control agenda, and I don't mean that like it's some sort of nasty dark conspiracy. It's just the energy that we've been in for thousands of years, right, where the shadow masculine has used its authoritarian control to create a structure on this planet because it has felt in alignment with the vibration that we've been in, and everyone's entrained into it. That's where we've been, and we're coming out of it now quite quickly as more and more of this sort of feminine, compassionate, collaborative energy rushes in. And it's not that the feminine is better than the masculine. Both sides have shadow. Both sides have light, right? But we've been through a shadow period, and that shadow period happened to be in the masculine. We've been through other shadow periods in other epochs of time that were feminine in nature, and then the divine masculine came in to lift us out of it, right? And brought some structure in a powerful way, in an active way. Structure does not need to be overly controlling, but this one has been. But maybe lost my point. Yes, so the time has been constructed and used on this planet in a way that has limited us greatly, and created a lot of deep beliefs around linearity of experience, and has taken the ability to embrace magic, if you want to use that term, or potential is another term. It's limited our ability to do things that are much more flowing or spiritual or impulsive, right? It's created this idea that if we have a dream, then we need to go through the steps to achieve it. And that's what we've experienced. So we believe we have to go through A, B, C, and D to prepare ourselves to achieve it. And I know just a minute ago I was talking about, just because you align with an energy, don't expect yourself to be there immediately, and there's going to be repercussions in your energetic field. And that seems to be true because that's what we're all experiencing. So I don't want people to be deluded in thinking that just because you have aligned with an energy that that's what you should feel straight away. But the potential is that you could, although in some way the energy still has to work through and the releases has to happen. But how long that takes is a variable that is in the process of transformation. Just because we have been experienced a long, drawn out, purifying process doesn't mean we need to keep doing that into the future, as we can free our minds from this. And part of the freeing our minds is finding a vibration and creating a vibration that supports us to do that. And so this thing is happening in a sort of a symbiotic way. As we keep freeing ourselves, we keep getting the opportunity to become more freed. As we get the opportunity to become more freed, we can free ourselves a little further. So we are human consciousness, along with the planet and the environment that we are creating, is evolving together. The evolution helps us to keep stepping forward. Us stepping forward helps the evolution to keep happening, right? Both are reliant on each other to continue the process. So it's not that you are the victim or completely reliant on what's happening around you. This is the point. You are creating what's happening around you, but what's happening around you is influencing you, and it keeps feeding back. There's these feedback loops that are infinitely complex on this planet, right? Multi-dimensional, that we can't understand with our head. But as we start to recognize that this is the symbiotic relationship we all have with life, right? And we start looking at environments in general, even if you just start looking at the microbiome in the fucking soil, it is immensely complex how it works and how everything comes together. And you think, how amazing is the architecture of this whole system? But ultimately, it all just comes down to energy mechanics, and everything is fulfilling a need, and everything is being drawn into this process by the process itself. It's an amazing self-fulfilling experience here on the planet. Jill said, the channeling I'm getting seems to want me to remember that all that's happening has all happened before, or has happened on a different timeline, and I can choose to create the future. Wow. Sensations. I'm working with abundance thinking for the last few weeks, so have opened a door, perhaps. Yeah, awesome, Jill. I love the fact that you feel that you are. I was reading in your thing just before I came on that you've been channeling an old school history teacher who had a lot of knowledge around, who had studied history. And what do they say? History never repeats, but it certainly rhymes, or something like that. So, of course, there are different experiences, but similar concepts keep becoming retested. We work in spirals, right? So we keep coming around to same sort of setups, and we have now a different experience of a same setup, and we can learn a lot from that. And we can it's not that we have to learn it in order to dance it effectively, but if we can prepare, it always helps to prepare. Like when I do my light language calls, I like to prepare a little bit and have some idea about what I'm going to talk about, because I recognize that when I do, I can then feel safe enough to let myself go with the energy. If I come in with absolutely no preparation, there's a sort of contraction there that I don't know what I'm going to talk about. And from that space of contraction, it's harder to allow the energy to flow through me. I've got very much better in these live streams where I don't prepare anything and I just pop on, although I do like it when I have a question, because then at least I know I have something to talk about when I get on, which then allows me to diverse from that question and allow the energy to flow through, which is based on who's watching at the time or who potentially is going to watch in the future, because Spirit knows that, and information flows through to meet the needs. That's how we work, right? So I just bought a spiral shell-shaped table lamp. Awesome. So the point is, with history, when we study history and we start seeing what's happened before and we start getting an idea of how things work, when we start really understanding the politics of humans and how control agendas and the shadow masculine, energy of control and authoritarian punishment energy has worked on the planet over the last few thousand years, we can feel a little bit more prepared. Now, the important thing is not to allow ourselves to draw conclusions that this is how it's going to be forever, or this is what we need to fight, or this is what we need to fix. But the more that we have awareness around what has been, the more that we can hold space for what we choose. When we demystify what is happening to some degree, and we get out of the idea that we have to understand it completely, but we get a level of understanding, it helps us to feel a little bit more empowered to step beyond it. Now, that's difficult because sometimes when we become aware of what has happened, we start to get caught up in just how powerful these energies are. I don't know, I had this same experience. I'm going to try and get rid of a calendar notification because it's annoying me. There we go, I did without changing the channel. I had the same experience with this whole quote-unquote COVID experience, and I know it's a triggering one, and I know it's a divisive one, and I wish it wasn't, so we could talk about it without people getting triggered into who was right and who was wrong. But the point is, for me, from my perspective, what upset me quite a bit was just how it seemed apparently easy the media was able to control the vast majority of the population so effectively, and I'll use the word conclusively, especially here in New Zealand, right, where we had such high levels of compliance and such vitriol from those who had bought into what the media was presenting as the absolute truth, had to anyone who was dared question what the media was portraying. Now, I don't want to get into the rights and the wrongs, as I said, but the point is, what was very interesting for me from viewing the psychology of the general population was how easily manipulated they seem to be, at least from my perspective, right? But I'm someone who doesn't watch television. I'm someone who doesn't listen to the radio. I didn't get bombarded with the same information that I did. And when I did have a look at those streams, because I did have a look, I was horrified at the commercials that were being presented at that time, right? During the every commercial break, sometimes twice a commercial break, the tones they were using, the psychology they were using of a military conversation of fighting this fucking thing, and we all need to pull, or we're all going to die, right? That energy was so powerful. I then understood how it could pull so many people into that belief system, into that mentality, into that narrative, and then have them so fearful and so aggressively angry to anyone who would question whether this is the right way to go. Where was I going with that? So with that, like with the awareness of how easy they all went in and how potent, how dangerous it was that such a huge group of people, millions of people, could become so militantly compliant, right? I know we're militantly non-compliant, but the most of the militant people were the compliant ones. Those of us who were dancing around the side had to be very careful with how we, quote unquote, protested against what was happening. Irrespective of the topic, right? And I know this whole COVID thing was an intense topic, but any topic, right? I'm also very interested in free speech, and I'm part of a free speech collective here in New Zealand because free speech rights are being heavily eroded as well. But, what I've gained from this free speech movement is just how important it is for them to allow everyone to have their opportunity to speak regardless of what they believe. Even people who have what most people would perceive abhorrent opinions. If we censor them, where do we draw the line? Who is choosing what's an abhorrent opinion, right? Because we just saw how that same mentality, right, got used against anyone who questioned whether being mandated to have an injection of an experimental procedure was a good thing or not. So it's difficult, because when something comes up that's actually against what you believe, do you still advocate for free speech, right? Are you still willing to say, yes, you have the right to publish your opinions, even though I think those opinions are absolutely, quote unquote, terrible or dark or whatever, right? And, you know, in a healthy society, of course, yes, of course we hold space for everyone to voice their opinions. From a space of acceptance, and acceptance means not that I accept that your opinion is valid, but I accept that you have the right to express your opinion, and your opinion is part of the rich tapestry of diversity that makes us a healthy society, a healthy environment. I have no idea how I got here, but I'm just thinking, where am I going now? I was talking about time, but the point is, it's helping me. I think I was starting to talk about how an example of how I got very concerned with, are we ever going to progress when society is so easily manipulated, right? With big agendas, with huge amounts of advertising potential, right? The government, who owns the medias and all the rest of it, or at least effectively own the media, it seems, can put their opinions very, very hypnotic ways in front of the population, very, very suggestive ways. Anywho's, we have to find trust that this is all a process. This is, and while it's easy to lose faith and easy to get, quote unquote, scared and easy to get fatalistic, that if, you know, these powers that be who have been practicing their art for thousands of years now in controlling populations, they're so good at it, and yet the fundamental energy that they've been using to sustain their rule is being eroded away very, very quickly. It's crumbling, actually. It's almost gone, the energy that they're running on, and they're running on like a shadow. They're running on a memory. They're running on history. I was talking about history before, and not understanding history. But the point is, we're going to break out of this cycle, and societies have fallen before. Like, we look at the Roman Empire that fell, and look at the history of that, which of course is fucking shaky now because it was, you know, how it was written and when it was written. I'm seeing if my windows or doors are open because someone all of a sudden is hammering something next door. And I'm out of time, just for a change. Yeah, exactly. Tanya said, I don't have to agree with you, but with what you have to say, but I will absolutely defend your right to say it. Yeah, that is the tenet of the free speech movement, right? Which I think is very, very powerful and important, and something I think is valid for us all to consider in how we move forward, because it's very easy for us who feel, you know, in many ways feel isolated from community, and to find a level of connection in groups like this, to then start getting into the mentality that we're right and they're wrong, and then start, you know, trying to cancel people who are speaking opposite to us or different to us. So don't fall into that trap, right? We have to work to advocate for what we believe in from a space of allowance, that not everyone is going to believe what we believe, and that's a healthy society that has difference of opinion, right? Monocultures are always very fragile, right? They fail. One locust plague comes through, the whole crop is wiped out. There is no diversity there. One disease gets out of hand and it's gone. The whole greenhouse is down, right? Monocultures, very fragile. They require high inputs of fertilizers, pesticides, care. Diverse ecosystems like forests require no care. Humans aren't in there pulling the weeds out of the forest because there are no weeds in the forest, because every plant is fulfilling a role, right? So nothing is out of place. The concept of crop and weed does not exist in a forest because it's all crop. And even the things that we can't utilize are still fulfilling a role for the forest, right? And we understand that in a forest, but can we understand that same concept in a collective of humans coexisting in a society? Because it is exactly the same. If we all think that we need to be the same in order for peace, we are very, very, very mistaken. Because if we all become the same, and I've seen this in yoga societies and stuff, if we all start having the same mentality, then when the wind of doubt comes through, the crop fails, right? Because there's no diversity, there's no foundation, there's no resilience. There's no genetic diversity to help us come through. There's no diversity of thinking that helps us weather the storm. There's no robust way of dealing with new situations, right? Because we haven't been practicing the art of debate, right? Sensible debate, not arguing about who's right and who's wrong, but debating concepts based on our opinions of those concepts, right? Looking at facts more objectively and being willing to listen to other people and their opinion. Doesn't mean that you need to be swayed and think, oh yeah, you're right. But when we understand why they have those opinions, even if it doesn't resonate with us, it allows us to hold space for those differing opinions and not feel threatened by differing opinions. And this is the point. Scared people who feel threatened can't cope with the idea that someone else believes something different to them because maybe they're wrong. I don't want to be wrong. I want to be on the right side. I want to get the injection because the injection's right. The government's telling me it's right. If everyone gets the injection, then I don't need to worry that I've made the wrong choice. But when other people stand up and say, I'm not getting it, and I'm going to go through the process of being persecuted by the government, right? I'm not allowed to go to cafes now. I'm not allowed to go to restaurants because of the public safety. That really threatens other people. Then they start getting very angry at you for not doing it because it basically threatens their belief that they've done the right thing, right? And what the point is, they don't want to actually think about whether they've done the right thing. They just want to be told because they're basically lazy. And that's not just their fault. That's the way that they've been brought up. They've been brought up in an authoritarian society where you do what your parents say, you do what your teachers say, you do what your boss says, you do what the police say, you do what the politicians say, right? You are controlled. You are told what to do and think and be. And in some ways, in exchange for that, you are kept safe. Now, you can trust that the rules are protecting you and you don't need to think for yourself. You don't need to take responsibility for yourself, and you get lazy. You get very, very lazy, like a lion in a cage, right? It's safe. It gets fed every day. It gets looked after, but it has no fucking freedom. Even if you let it out in the savannah now, it doesn't actually know how to hunt anymore. It doesn't even have the strength in its muscles to hunt anymore because it's spent its whole life in a cage where it was fed and looked after, but it had no freedom and it couldn't express itself as a lion. This is where society's at, right? We've all been caged, where we've been given everything we need to survive. Our life has become very, very easy, and yet we are dying as souls. And so this opportunity that's befalling us, which is chaotic as the structures of society are falling away, now give us the opportunity to take responsibility for ourselves and to get out and express ourselves as divine beings having a human experience, which we haven't done for a long time on this planet collectively, right? Because we've just been caught up in this mentality of do what you're told and then you'll survive. But the point is, what's the point of being alive if you're not living? And this is what we're coming to, right? Anywho's, that was a bit of a rant. I don't think I got to the end of talking about why time's falling apart, because it's one of those constructs that's been used to control us, and as we let it fall apart and we don't get too concerned about the fact that we're fucking skipping days and time seems to be slipping and all the rest of it, but just live in the moment, right? And we, of course, we still need to show up, and we still have calendars and fucking clocks and all the rest of it so that we can make dates and talk about things in a sensible way. But as we let go of holding on to that so strongly, absolutely, right? If we let go of the absoluteness of this time and just use it as a tool, which is what it is, then we can experience more magic, experience more aliveness, experience more truth of who we be. Yeah, Susie said, yes, agree. But I'm first to admit I was originally in that very trusting. I took it being put into the other camp of not wanting vaccination and being penalised from that. So seeing through the boy. Yeah, exactly. We have to have experiences to help us understand. Like I had an experience way back talking about vaccinations just to help you guys understand. It's not that I had some spiritual revelation that, you know, vaccination was bad. I did my research. I did my research back in the late 90s because I had an experience in the early 90s where one of my friends who had a hepatitis injection, hepatitis B, which we all got for free in the surf club in the sort of mid-90s, early 90s, mid-90s, early 90s, I think it was. Anyway, because it was hepatitis B and people getting hepatitis B from needle sticks, and there were some needles left on beaches and so obviously government rolls out this thing, all surf lifesavers can get free course of hepatitis. Well, one of my friends had quite a reasonably bad reaction to it, and it was the first time that I realised that vaccinations weren't benign. It's like, oh, shit, right? I got that, you know, hepatitis B thing for free and no problem. But someone I knew had a reaction to it that put them in hospital for a few days, right? So then when it came time and I'm, you know, Marie's pregnant and coming up for children. And after that, I got into yoga and we went overseas, and the people I went overseas with were other people from the yoga school, and some of them were homeopaths and naturopaths and stuff. And when we started talking about what vaccinations do you need to go, they're saying you don't need any. This is what we take. We take homeopathic prophylaxis, we take these herbal supplements, and we're fine, right? We don't get cholera, we don't get whatever, all the other shit that you're supposed to take when you go to India. So I did that and I was fine and I didn't have any adverse effect. And I hate needles for a start, so it will seem like a win-win to me. Then along comes children and I start, you know, doing some research. And in those days, you had to mail order books, right? There was no searching shit on the internet. It wasn't nearly so easy. So mail ordering books around alternate beliefs around, or the facts around childhood immunization, as it's called, right? Because it makes people immune, but it's basically vaccination, which offers some form of immunity for some on some degree, and looking at all of the historic, you know, the facts and the figures around this, and realised that the whole thing was a fucking hoax. Potentially the whole vaccination campaign came on the back end of most of these diseases naturally falling away anyway as a result of hygiene being introduced to the world, etc., right? And the, you know, like the whole polio thing, which is basically DDT poisoning. That's what it is, because everyone who got polio was basically getting DDT off the fresh fruit and vegetables that had all been sprayed with, by and large, and they've never actually... Anyway, I don't need to get into the whole conspiracy. But anyway, I read a lot of information. Something's really stuck out. Like in Japan, in the mid-90s, the later mid-90s, they decided to raise the vaccination age from starting at 3 months to starting at 2. And all of a sudden, their cot death, their sudden infant death syndrome, vanished. Like went from whatever percent to next to 0. No infants were dying anymore in their beds at night. Right? And we were all told, you know, that it's because they suffocate and you've got to put them to sleep on their backs, and you've got to have pillows made of this fucking shit so they don't get suffocated, right? And it's not the truth, right? The sudden infant death syndrome is a vaccine reaction. Obviously, because Japan, a big country with a lot of people, had very conclusive evidence to show that, right? And then when they did start vaccinating their children at 2, because they had a more developed immune system, they were able to cope with it better, right? So that's what they do in Japan. They start vaccinating children at 2, right? This information just didn't get out through the rest of the world for whatever reason. Like, you wonder, why the fuck isn't every country doing that, right? I'm not 100% against vaccination. I don't believe in it personally, because I don't believe there's evidence to prove that it actually works very well. But the point is, there's evidence out there to show that things could improve. So anyway, that's what led me to be a quote-unquote anti-vaxxer from a long time ago, because I did a lot of research back in the late 90s before my children were born, which formed an opinion around the idea that vaccinating infants wasn't a great idea. And then I haven't had vaccination since the hepatitis vaccination, for that matter. Anyway, my friends, I'm ranting. And just wanting to fill you in that my opinions are not necessarily just based on a whim. I could go into the whole climate change thing too, if you want, and the research I've done around, you know, the evidence backing up the idea of greenhouse warming as an example, right? The fact that carbon dioxide is creating a greenhouse effect in this environment that is causing the temperature to rise. And the evidence that supports that is very, very poor and has not been in any way conclusive that that's what is actually happening, as an example. And then you start looking at who's benefiting from this narrative and what they're doing. And you start, it's very easy to start seeing conspiracies, which is what they are, when there's a lot of evidence. And you can say, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist, but when your theory starts to become reality, you're now a truth teller, not a conspiracy theorist. Every new idea starts as a theory. The whole term conspiracy theory is a ridiculous term that was, well, it was invented by the CIA to push down the claims that JFK was assassinated by the government rather than some rogue gunman. But anyway, we could go down lots of rabbit holes. The point is, I'm not here to make you believe what I believe. I'm here to inspire you to think for yourselves. Think for yourselves. Be willing to question narratives that are being pushed in your direction, especially when they're being pushed with a lot of effort. The more effort that various agendas or structures, governments, whatever the structure is, the more effort that they're using to try to get you to do something, to believe something, the more likelihood there's an ulterior motive. And I know that sounds dark, and I know that sounds untrusting. And I talk a lot about trust, right? I talk a lot about trust, but I talk more about trusting yourself and trusting the universe rather than trusting man-made structures. I think we should all have a healthy level of non-trust in any external force that is trying to get us to behave in a certain way. If something has our best outcome as their desire, they will lovingly give you the option. They will not fear-based force you. This is the point. Love sets us free, and and it's important for us to remember that, especially like working with our children. I know I'm going on forever now, but if we try and control our children with fear, if we try and control our children with force, it doesn't work. The way to help our children, the way to guide our children is lovingly. And I know it's hard when we think, because we love our children so much, that we want them to do what we think is right, and then we use tactics, we use strategies that are based in fear to get them to do that. And we think that's an expression of our love, but really it's just an expression of our fear that our children are going to do something that we don't believe in, or we don't agree with, or we can't control, that might hurt them, and then we will lose them, and then we will have a net loss. When we're worried about what we might lose, we're actually acting from fear, not love, right? And this is the danger, if you like, with love. When we love something, it's very easy to start fearing that we're going to lose it. This is the practice, right? How do we love something, advocate for its best outcome and our best outcome without getting into this fear-based narrative of trying to control now what we love so that we don't lose it? We do this with our partnerships, we do this with our children, we do this with our friends, we do this with an object that we've found an attachment around. We think we love this object so much, so now we don't let other people use it because we don't want them to damage it, etc., right? We create conditional attachments, and it takes away our ability to enjoy life. It takes away our opportunity to experience things. And so life's tricky, my friends. I'm not saying it's easy, but it comes down to some pretty basic or simple ideas. Anyway, I know I've ranted and I've probably shared more than I normally would. But that's it. And there's a whole lot more comments. So yeah, I'll finish with Susie said, the biggest lesson I learned from the COVID narrative was think for myself. Yeah, and it's important to recognize that none of us truly can think for ourselves. We're all influenced by energies around us, right? So even our own thoughts and even our own thought process, we have to keep inquiring in what is influencing me in making this decision. Because there are always influences. None of us can ever become free of influences, but we can become more aware of what is influencing us and be always willing to test whatever conclusions we come to test and retest, be willing to adapt, adjust, and accommodate as time goes on, we receive more evidence. Can we stay open to the idea that everything is changing all of the time? And what I believe right now is not necessarily what I should be believing tomorrow, right? So that's a difficult one, because we love the idea of a conclusion. We love the idea that we know what's happening and what is going to happen. And so we can easily apply that after we've put a lot of effort into doing our research and coming to an idea. Like if I apply this to myself, if I I'm not closed off to the idea that we could be receiving a level of injection of something that we call a vaccination that would actually be very useful and helpful. I haven't seen the evidence so far of what has been produced, especially around this COVID thing, of things actually being useful. That's the point. And I know a lot of people say, well, you're fucking mad because, modern medicine, the vaccination has solved all of these problems and all the rest of it. I know that's the main narrative that's been projected out there. But when you look at the research behind that main narrative, and this is what's taught to all doctors, but people don't actually look at the evidence behind that. They just look at the evidence that supports that. And it's very easy to do that, right? And as someone who did do science in university, I understand, from learning about the scientific process, how dangerous it can be when you have a bias and you just look for evidence that supports what you want to find out, what you want to prove, right? It's very easy to prove what you want to when you're only looking at selective evidence. And this is very easy to do subconsciously, and it's really easy to do if you have a conscious intent to twist narratives. And it happens all of the time now that basically corporations pay for all of the science that's done, and they all have an agenda. Corporations all have an agenda to make money. I don't care who you are. If you think I'm being negative in saying that, I'll fight you. Well, all corporations have their main responsibility to pleasing their shareholders. That's the nature of it. That's how it works. That's how capitalism works. And that means making profits. And I'm not saying that you can't make a profit doing a good thing. You definitely can. But it's just extremely difficult to be completely subjective and objective when you are in the game of making money to please other people who just want you to make money. Anywho, my friends, too much, too long, but we will be back maybe next week at the same time, maybe at a slightly different time. We'll have a talk about something different. Much, much love. Bye for now. Well, I can't even hit the finish button.